Yeah, it's happened really quickly. Chargers get Harbaugh. We have addressed that. Tennessee, and this was a bit of a surprise, they hire Brian Callahan, offensive coordinator, Cincinnati Bengals. History of working with young quarterbacks, bunch of different places. Prime example of his impact in young quarterbacks is how they groomed and grew Joe Burrow, and then how they groomed Jake Browning when Burrow went down with a major injury, and you saw how Browning nearly led Cincinnati back into the playoffs. So Brian Callahan goes to Tennessee, and he walks in the front door. He's already got a quarterback in Will Levis from Kentucky that I think is the guy. Now they got to make a decision as to what they're doing dollar-wise with Derrick Henry, what they're going to do with DeAndre Hopkins. They still have a good defensive front, so it's not like the cupboard's completely bare. But his track record with young quarterbacks is the reason I think Brian Callahan is there. In Washington, I've been told they've offered Ben Johnson, the Detroit Lions offensive coordinator, the head coaching job. Now, I kind of found that really weird in that they don't have a quarterback in Washington. Now, granted, they do have a very high draft pick. Mm-hmm. So maybe the theory is, Ben, this is your area of expertise. You go into the draft and you go get us the right quarterback, whether it's Caleb Williams or whether it's somebody else. Now, he hasn't been hired yet, and he can't be hired until the weekend is over. That's what I hear, although there's also a rumor that they might be back in the marketplace going for second interviews with a few other people, but I think Ben Johnson's going to be the guy. In Seattle, Dan Quinn is there at this hour, second interview, Dallas Cowboys.
Oh, wow.
Now, there are a lot of emotional ties. Dan Quinn worked for Pete Carroll in Seattle. Dan did a great job with the Seahawks, Legion of Doom, wound up going to Atlanta, had a winning record in Atlanta, but got bounced, wound up resurfacing, reinventing himself with a pretty good Dallas Cowboy team. Raheem Morris, the Rams defensive coordinator, is also there. So in all honesty, it might be one of those two guys. And then there's Carolina. And this is kind of a really interesting story. They had set up a second interview with Mike Vrabel to bring him back. And all of a sudden, Vrabel seems to be on the outs and has not been hired anywhere. So I thought that he was going to be the guy. And then all of a sudden, just before, I'm just checking my notes here, doubly make sure I get this correct. Just before I came on the air, Carolina has just hired Dave Canalis, offensive coordinator, Tampa Bay. Had been there only 1 year and did mystical things with Baker Mayfield.
Yeah.
And Dave has been hired while Vrabel supposedly was on his way back to Charlotte for the second interview. So Canalis winds up being the head coach in Carolina. So we have only 3 NFL jobs that are now left open there. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the last couple of jobs that are open. But Canalis, to me, becomes a surprise hire after just 1 year in Tampa. However, quarterback guru, who's the quarterback in Carolina?
Bryce Young.
Bryce Young, who needs a hell of a lot of help.
Yes, he does.
Because they need players around him, too. And it's interesting that they hired Canalis in Carolina without having hired a general manager yet, much like the Chargers have not hired a general manager. So that's the coaching carousel as we sit here heading towards a great sports weekend, and things have started to move at pretty fast speed. And once we get beyond the games on Sunday night, you may see a couple of these other jobs fill lickety-split.
Yeah, I have a comment on the coaches, but first I just want to welcome all the live stream viewers from the Winnipeg Sports Talk. I mean, all of a sudden they came flying in. So, hey, welcome, guys. Appreciate you being here. What happened with Eric Bieniemy? I mean, he went to the Commanders. We thought he was the heir apparent. He was this hot young guy, and is they skipping over him this year?
One interview. That's all he's had.
That's incredible.
He
was he was the hot guy.
The last 2 seasons prior, he was hot guy, but I don't know the understanding. We don't know what's happened in the interviews, whether he didn't interview well the guy's track record under Andy Reid was tremendous. Now he walked into a bad situation in Washington where they didn't have a quarterback, and then they had injuries and they weren't very good offensively. So I don't know. I mean, it'd be shocking. There'll be a new coach in Washington. Do they keep Eric Bieniemy as offensive coordinator if Ben Johnson gets the job coming from Detroit? So yeah, that's one of the weird angles to this thing is he's interviewed. I want to say he interviewed 14 times in 3 off seasons and hadn't got an offer.
Unbelievable. And now this year he only got one. So it seems like
That was one in-house.
and they've essentially passed him by.
Yes.
Well, incredible how it's gone so hot to so cold for him.
Well, do you interview well? That's hugely important.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm stunned. But maybe not everybody's cut out to be a head coach.
Well, that's clear. I mean, we've seen Norv Turner and a lot of other really hot coordinators flame out with that top job. Maybe Bieniemy is just too much of of a tough guy, and maybe kind of alienates some players. I don't know. I mean, I'm just surprised by it.
Andy Reid spoke glowingly about him time and time and time again. Okay.